Taylor Swift was named Time Magazine Person of the Year. Now, very interesting as to why Time Magazine has named Taylor Swift their Person of the Year. Let me go ahead and read for you directly from the magazine. They said, quote, "Every year contains light and contains dark. But 2023 was a year of significant darkness. A divided world where institutions failed us, but Taylor Swift became our source of light. And due to the fates in nature, no one else can move people or heal people so well as Taylor." End quote. Now, for the record, this morning, I have nothing against all the Swifties in the room. Taylor seems like a kind individual. But when your hope as a world is pinned on a middle-aged pop star, you're in a very, very sad situation. Apparently, there was not a president who has done enough to be on the cover of Time magazine. Apparently, there was not a Nobel Peace Prize winner who has done enough this last year to be on the cover of Time magazine. Apparently, there's not been a king or a queen who has done enough this year to be on the cover of Time magazine. Apparently, there's not even a social worker or a revolutionary who has done enough for the world to be on the cover of Time magazine. No, when the cover of the magazine and the hope of the world is someone in pink spandex and known for glitter bombs, you know that the world is in a woeful and grievous place. And that's why there's such a somber mood this year around Christmas. People, because of the culture war, are nervous to even put a nativity scene up in their yard. Congressmen are stealing money. I mean, you say, well, what's new? Well, now they're just open about it. Inflation rates are keeping people from being able to travel and enjoy the holidays. China is secretly building an elite army. Over half of Africa is starving to death. And we're coming up on an election year, and by and large, there is a somber mood that is hanging over society. And so at one level, Time magazine actually got it right. There is a lot of hopelessness, and there is a lot of pain, and there is a lot of grief. There's a lot of darkness. But obviously, Time magazine also got it very, very wrong. The light in that darkness is not a pop star. It'll never be a pop star. A pop star will never heal the betrayal, the hurts, the pains, the agonies that come with earth. Now, I already know, looking around, this is an initiated audience. You're part of Mission Bible Church, that there is not one of you, prayerfully, that believes that Taylor Swift is the light of the world. Just one guy in the back. He's got his shirt on. Of course, I would assume that. Which is why this morning I want to do something a little bit different. I want to show you who the real light of the world is, but I want to show you who that light is and was before Bethlehem, before the prophets, before David, before Israel and Moses, before Joseph, before Abraham. I want to take you, get this, all the way back 4,000 years to show you just how early people in the middle of pain and agony were holding on to someone other than Taylor Swift as their source of light in the darkness. And so if you have your Bibles, take them with me. Here we go. Let's jump back to the Old Testament this morning. Let's go to the book of Job. I know, I can tell. You all were planning to hear us talk about Job for Christmas. And so you're excited. This is what you expected. But if you've never studied the book of Job, you should. It is one of those books that is so empathetic and so sympathetic to what we're going through. It helps us to put our life in perspective. But I want you to go back with me now 4,000 years to look at really what is the most detailed human agony ever caught in record. And in the middle of that, you're going to see the earliest glimpse in history of the light of the world, who is not Taylor Swift. And so look at this. Let's go ahead and begin in Job 1. And let's begin in verse 1 with a scene that many of you will recognize. But let's quickly skim it so we have it in our mind again. If you're a note taker, we're just talking here about a conversation that is happening in the court of heaven. This is we'll call the conversing in the courts of heaven. And here we go. Job chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man, just a regular man, although you're going to see a very influential man, but he was just a man in the land of Uz, or Uz. Nobody really knows exactly where Uz or Uz was. It was probably in northern Arabia somewhere. So here you have a man in northern Arabia whose name was Job. And the Bible tells us that this man was blameless and upright. He is fearing God. He's turning away from evil. And so really, if there was a guy in all of the Bible that we would assume should not ever incur judgment, it would be Job. He takes God seriously. He's above reproach. He not only loves God on the inside, he's living for God on the outside. There really should be no reason that he would ever be judged. In fact, verse 2, 7 sons and 3 daughters are born to him. His possessions also are 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, very many servants, and a partridge in a pear tree. And that man was the greatest of all men of the East. And so the windows of heaven are just dripping down on this man. I mean, if you looked at him from a distance, you'd go, he's got influence, he's got clout, and he's got a beautiful family. So he's got the work-life balance going on. And his sons, verse 4, used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, probably like a birthday. And they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And so a picture of family harmony and reunions and love and laughter. Everything that we all hoped for in our homes, but very few of us ever get. The kids are coming back 7 times a year, and they just want to be in our presence and celebrate with us. How often does that happen, right? And in verse 5, it came about when the day of feasting had completed their cycle, that Job would send and consecrate them. So not only is he a businessman with clout, not only is he a family man with a loving family, but also he's a spiritual man. Look at this, verse 5. He would send for them and he would consecrate them towards the end of the year, like at picture Christmas time. Rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Now, real important to understand, you're going back pre-Moses, pre-law, pre-Israel here, where the patriarchal figure in the home would have been the spiritual leader. And so he's standing and he's mediating in between his children and God, and he's saying, Lord, if there's anything that by chance they've done this year where they've turned their back on you, I'm praying on their behalf. He's fulfilling his role as a spiritual leader. I mean, if there was one candidate that deserved a blessing, it was Job. If there was one candidate that never deserved judgment, it seems to be Job, which is why things get interesting, as we all know, in verse 6. The veil is pulled back between heaven and earth, and we get a peek of what happens up there interdimensionally. Now, there was a day when the sons of God, the angels, came to present themselves before the Lord. We can picture that God, the Lord, sends out the angels to do their duties, and then they come back with their reports, and then he again discharges them to their next mission, and they come back with their reports. And on a typical day in heaven, this is what's happening until someone else arrives with them at the end of verse 6. You all know who it is? And Satan, the fallen angel Lucifer, who had formerly been one of the great cherubim surrounding the throne, yet had thrown a coup and taken a third of the angels with him. Satan also then comes among them. And the Lord said, verse 7, to Satan, from where do you come? Not because the Lord doesn't know, but because he wants Satan to respond. And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming about on the earth and walking around on it. Remember, friends, Satan is not in hell. Satan is on the earth. He's prowling the earth like a roaring lion. He is the prince of the power of the air. For a little bit of time, he's been given dominion here. And the Lord said to Satan, I love this, look at who initiates and who throws Job's name into the ring. Have you considered my servant Job. Hey, Satan, coming over here. Where you been? Been on earth. Well, hey, Satan, I want to point someone out to you. Look at this guy. He's a stud. This guy's a rock star. He's the man. For there is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing me and turning away from evil. Now, if you have a pen, you want to just put a little asterisk there and remember who initiates this conversation and who tosses Job into the fire. Make no mistake about it, friends. God is always in charge. When you're in a test, when you are in the fire, when things are not going well, that is still a divine appointment, and God knows every molecule on this earth, including what you're going through. He's permitting it, if not appointing it. He's not confused. And Satan answered the Lord with a diabolical answer that only Lucifer himself could possibly conjure up. Satan answered the Lord this question: does Job fear God for nothing? Does Job fear you for nothing? You think that he respects you just because he respects you? You think that he loves you simply because he loves you, that he worships you simply because you're worthy of worship? Have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? Have you not blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land? No, you put forth your hand and touch all that he has, and he's going to curse you to your face. And what you're seeing there, friends, is the most diabolical scheme of Luciferian evil. As in one question, he not only insults Job and says, that guy only worships you because you're a vending machine to him. He also subliminally insults God by saying you're only worthy of worship because you're a vending machine to him. You're not worthy of worship because of your beauty. You're not worthy of worship because you're inherently good. You're only worthy of worship because of what you spit out upon humanity. Only the devil could come up with a question like that. So God, what does he do? You all know the story, verse 12. The Lord said to Satan, behold. He grabs him by the chin, looks at him in the eyes and says, listen to me. All that he has, it's in your power. This man who's in a class by himself, this man who is the tallest in the forest, this man who is the mountain among men, you go ahead and you do whatever you want. Just go for it. And friends, does Satan do that? Absolutely he does. Wealth, gone. Houses, gone. All in one day, all of his children, gone. Dead. To the point that Satan then comes back and takes his very health, you remember? And he's lying there with boils that are pussing out around an ashen fire as his wife comes in and says, just curse God, commit suicide, and die. And his friends are sitting around the fire looking at him going, what did you do wrong, man? What are you hiding? You've got secret sins in your closet. God is judging you. This man is absolutely devastated. Merry Christmas. Which leads us to number 2. From the courts of heaven, we move now, number 2, you ready, to the cries that come from the ash heap of earth. The cries. Jump over with me to Job 19. Let's just fast forward through the story a little bit for sake of time, and you really don't want to read all these speeches. They're long. You should go back and read them another time. But here we have Bildad, one of his friends, sitting around the fire pit with him. And he's blaming him. You know, Job, you did something. You got something going on in your life. You did something wrong. You're being judged. And then in chapter 19, verse 7, we begin to see Job's response to Bildad. And you can just see let's jump down to verse 7. He begins to basically say, God's doing this to me, Bildad. In the very first line, he says, behold, Bildad, I cry. And what does he cry? I cry violence. That's an exclamation. In the modern vernacular, it'd be like when we cry. You guys ever say not fair? You ever said that? You get on your knees before God and you're like, God, that's not fair. That's what this is. You are doing something to me that's hurtful. You're doing something to me that is violent. But I get no answer, Bildad. I shout for help, but there's no justice. He's walled up my way so that I cannot pass, and he's put darkness on my paths. He stripped my honor from me and removed the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I am gone. He's uprooted my hope like a tree. He's kindled, verse 11, his anger against me and considered me as his enemy. His troops come together and build up their way against me, meaning his angels, and they camp around my tent. He looks across the fire there at Bildad, and he's saying, God is doing this to me, and he's crying out that question that we all cry, why, oh why, oh why, oh why? And it's a genuine desperation, friends, to the point that by the time he gets here, he's not even concerned about the pain anymore, and the agony anymore, and the loss anymore. What he's concerned about is the fact that there is now a wall in the ceiling between heaven and earth, and he says, God, why are you not even hearing my cry? What did I do? And that's what happens, by the way, friends, when we're really broken. There comes a place, and some of you have been there, where our prayers are no longer even theologically accurate anymore. We know up here that God hears. We know up here that God sees what we're going through. But from the gut, we begin to cry out and go, God, I get this Christian thing, and I'm a Christian, but right now I don't even want to be a Christian because I don't understand why you're doing this to me. That gets real right there. That gets real. And if you go, well, I've never been there, man. I'm theologically resolute. You just wait, because at some point in your life, you will be low enough that you'll be on your knees with the tears and the snot draining, and it'll be real to you. And you remember this sermon, and you crack open your Bible, and you open it to Job, and you'll find your solace there to know that you're not the only one who's ever wrestled through what you consider to be these evil machinations and thoughts. Every one of us at some point will get there. And he summarizes why. Look at verse 13. He says, he has removed brothers from me, and my acquaintances are estranged from me. My relatives have failed me. My intimate friends have forgotten me. Those who live in my house and my maids, I'm a foreigner in their sight. I call to my servant, he doesn't answer. I have to beg him. My breath is offensive to my wife. And some of you, you're like, that happens all the time. No, this is different. This is repulsive to the point that the rot inside his body is causing his wife to not even want to come in his room. Verse 18, even young children despise me. I rise up and they speak against me. All my associates abhor me. Those I love have turned from me. My bone clings to my skin. I've lost all this weight. Verse 21, pity me. Oh, you, my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. See, there are some of you in the room here today, and you're going, I have a pretty tough life, and things are not going very well. Listen to me. You have never been this low. There is not one of you in the room, no matter how hard your life has been, that you've ever had it this hard. When you study the Hebrew here, and he literally is saying that my siblings ignore me. My best friends pretend they don't know me. The servants are treating me like a foreigner. I'm begging from my old employees. My body smells so bad, my wife won't come in the room. Listen to this. The kids are shrieking in terror when they see me in the streets. Can you imagine? You're walking down the street, and when these beautiful little children look at you, they shriek in terror and they wail in their mommy skirts, going, Mom, what is that? Is that a monster? To the point when Bildad gets there, he says, please, just pity me. Just cry with me. Because I'm a skeleton. I am death walking. He finally gets to the point where he says, you know what? I'm going to die. Just write my story down. I'll never understand why this happened. I'm just praying the next generation will have a record of it, and maybe they'll be able to explain why a man like me was judged so bad like this. That's why verse 23. Look at the exclamation marks. Oh, that my words were written. I mean, this is like he's smacking his fist, and he's saying, oh, that someone would just write it down, that they would inscribe it in a book, that with an iron stylus and lead, that they would engrave it in the rock. For everybody saying is just forget about me. Just write it down so that some point somewhere, a generation could look back at this and they'd be able to have some level of understanding about what can happen to a good man upon the earth, because I'll never understand why. Now, by the way, let's pause right there. What are we actually doing right now? Was his prayer answered? Oh, you bet it was. Millions of people over 4,000 years have found their solace and their hope where? in the fact that his prayer was answered and his words were in fact written down. That's what we're reading this moment. And you know what? That right there would be enough of a message. We could just close our Bibles and pack it up because Desmond went so long on announcements. And we could go, you know what? We got shopping to do. So let's just cut it short, Tone. We're good. And we just learned something. We got sovereign God. We got him seeing everything we go through. The words were inscribed 4,000 years. That's proof that no matter what's going on in my life, God's got his hand in it. And in the end, it's all going to be okay. All right, pack it up. Good Christmas. We said. And for most of us, I think that would get me, it'd get me 50% through Christmas with some joy. Knowing big God out there, he's got it. That's good. Which is why it's so absolutely astounding that out of nowhere, like a lightning bolt, pow, 4,000 years ago in the desert of Arabia, before Bethlehem, before the prophets, before David, before Israel, this guy moves from his cry in the ash heap, ready for number 3? To clinging to a coming solution, a clutching, a clasping, a clenching to a coming answer. Look at it there in verse 25. He says, you just write it all down. Write it down. Someday I'm going to die. They all can read it. But let me tell you where my hope is. Verse 25. As for me. All right, I need you to read this with me, third service. Here we go. As for me, he looks at Bildad, I know that my what? Woo, we just got Christmassy. Did you feel it? Did you feel that? I know something. And you go, well, how did he know that? We don't know how he knew this. That's how early it is. Other than Yahweh told him, God told him, angel of the Lord told him. I know that my Redeemer lives. That word in Hebrew, goel, my kinsman redeemer, he lives. Oh, and then he goes on with commentary. And at the last day, he will take, that redeemer, his stand upon the earth. Oh, and even after my skin is destroyed, yet from my flesh, or in Hebrew, apart from my flesh, I shall see God, whom I myself shall get to behold, and whom my eyes shall see. You're going back way before Bethlehem and way before Moses and Joseph and possibly before Abraham, and you have a man saying there is going to be a Redeemer who is going to come. He's going to walk the earth. He's going to love men, be like men upon the earth, and he's going to deliver men on the earth. And oh, by the way, he's also going to allow me, once my skin is off, to see God. You're not excited yet? Okay. You wanted Christmas. What you just saw is 4,000 years ago, a man in an ash heap giving you God's ultimate answer to the agony of mankind. A coming Redeemer. A goel, which means a man who would come and be like men, who would be able to deliver men. Now, in the Old Testament, anyone remember the illustration of this, the beautiful analogy of this? Which book in the Old Testament showcases a kinsman redeemer? The book of Ruth. Remember that? Ruth leaves Moab with Naomi, and then they go trudging and walking all the way back to Bethlehem, back home. And Ruth says, your God, my people, my people, that whole cute thing. They go walking. They're poor. They're starving. And so Naomi says, well, we can go, and you can kind of pick up the little sheaves and grain around the fields. And so Ruth is doing a good job, but they're still starving. Until one day, there's a man, what's his name? Picture him, tall, dark, and handsome, with his hands on his side, with his Superman cape flowing. His name is Boaz, and he says, why don't you just stay in my field? Hint, hint. And long story short, Ruth goes home, and then Naomi is really sharp. She realizes the Israel has the levirate vow, and so Naomi says, oh, you need to go and put on your lipstick, and you need to comb your hair, and put on a nice dress, and get those fake eyelashes, and you run down to the threshing floor, and you throw yourself at his feet, remember this? And you just beg and say, would you possibly be my goel, my kinsman redeemer? The idea being, when you were starving, when you had nothing left, when you had no other solutions, when you were at the bottom of the barrel, the way Israel law worked was you could throw yourself at the behest of one of your family members, and then they would step in and they would deliver you. Job says, there is coming one who will deliver me. And then notice there in verse 26 that he actually says it's going to work out by a death and a resurrection. This is fascinating to me. Even after my skin is destroyed, yet apart from my flesh, I shall still see God, whom I myself shall behold and whom my eyes shall see. He says this Redeemer is going to make it possible that even after I die, I'll get to see God. There was a really sweet lady, super kind, and she caught Bree a couple weeks ago, and she said, Miss Wood, is Tony okay? My wife said, well, we don't know. She said, because he talks a lot about, like terminal illnesses and dying and diagnoses and caskets and everything, and so she was really sweet. She said, is he sick? Now, as far as I know, I'm good. I'm 45, but I'm feeling okay. But let me just make something really clear, okay? In case you didn't know this, guess what the mortality rate is in this room? 100%. My job description is to get you ready for the day that your skin falls off. Because it's coming. Some of you younger people are a long time away. No, it goes quick. My job description is to get you ready for the day that your skin falls off and you get to see God. You know what's so amazing about this? Whatever you do this morning, don't miss this. Look at this. 4,000 years ago, you have a desperate man from North Arabia who's lying in an ash heap with pussy boils all over his skin, and he's clinging. Are you ready for this? He's clinging in hope to what would one day be known as Christmas and Easter. What you're reading is the very earliest record in all human history of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, the coming of one, a babe in a manger, who would live a perfect life, die a substitutionary death, he'd be resurrected on the third day, and he would forever be known as what? Your Redeemer. What did the angels say to the shepherds? Do you remember what they said? Today is born for you a Savior, God, who is Christ the Lord, who is a baby born in a manger. God is coming down, Job says. The angels look at the shepherds and say, oh, guess what happened? God came down. The Goel is here. The Goel is here. I love Rembrandt because he painted pictures way back before all the loosey-goosey impressionist stuff, like real paintings, because you actually can understand them. He has a painting that maybe you've seen. It's called The Adoration of the Shepherds. And what it is this beautiful manger scene where you've got the shepherds coming in and they're all pouring over the little manger and the little baby Jesus. But the focus, interestingly, is not on the character Jesus. It's on the fact that in sharp relief, all the shepherds have half of their face lit. And if you ever pull it up on your phone and look at it, it's amazing because you realize what he's trying to portray is that there's light coming from somewhere. And your eyes look around, obviously there's no sun, there's no moon or stars, and there's no incandescent lighting in the little stable, and it's pretty obvious right away that the whole purpose of the little picture is that the light comes from the manger, and it's lighting everyone up. What you're seeing here, friends, is Job saying, I am holding on to the fact that there is a real light coming, and guess what? 2,000 years now, on the other side of it, we're all looking back, holding on to the fact that there was a real light who came in that manger, and that is the hope of the world. J.I. Packer says, the gospel tells us that our Creator has become our Redeemer. It announces that the Son of God has become man and has died on the cross to save us from judgment. He quenched God's wrath against us by obliterating our sins from his sight. The gospel brings us solutions to human problems. It does. But it does so by first solving a deeper problem, the deepest of all problems, the problem of man's relationship with his Maker. And unless we make it plain that the solution of these former problems depends upon the settling of this bigger problem, we misrepresent the message of our God entirely, end quote. Taylor Swift can't help you even with your puny human problems. She can't help you with the aches in your back. She can't help you with the family distress. She can't help you with the finances. Well, maybe she could, but she ain't going to. But she certainly can't help you with your eternal ones. The fact that you and I are dead sinners, and we stand before a holy God, and there is no entrance into that heaven, and Taylor Swift can never lay her body over that chasm, allowing us to walk over it to get into the graces of a mighty God. There is only one who ever could, and his name is Jesus. For thousands of years, people have been looking for Jesus. And now, for thousands of years, Christians have been looking back upon Jesus, the Redeemer, the Goel. When God came down to satisfy his very own wrath, it all happened in Jesus, and that is the light of the world. But did you catch in there, friends? The only way for it to work, did you catch it? A Goel, a Redeemer, was that the creature has to come to a place where they acknowledge their need. I have to come to the place where I acknowledge I'm the sinner, and then the Savior comes. I have to acknowledge that I'm in darkness, and then the light comes. If you're in this room, and in 2023, you've been trying to do it yourself, you've been trying to figure it out, you're thinking you're strong enough, you're tough enough, you're thinking that you have the answers to this life, you need to understand it'll never work. The only way to wake up in 2024 having hope, having peace, having joy, having a future, not only in this life, but after this one, after death, when you cross into the great unknown, is if you are holding on to the light of the world, the person Jesus Christ. And the only way you get him is to surrender and submit, bow your knee, and say, I receive freely what you have done for me. So if you're in this room and you're in darkness, don't go into this Christmas in darkness. Go into this Christmas in light. Turn away from yourself, from your sin, from your selfishness. Bow your knee to Jesus. He says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, which simply means my teaching is easy. My fellowship to follow me is light. Why? Because I do it for you. And all who come to me, anyone, I will never cast out. No, it's not Taylor Swift. And it's not presidents. And it's not kings. And it's not a Nobel Peace Prize winner. It's always and forever Jesus. That's the light of the world.